Ms. Ontiveros to make roll call to establish a quorum.
Mayor Ed Honey.
Here.
Mayor Tom Murphy.
Here.
General Ted Maxwell.
Here.
Supervisor Rex Scott.
Here.
Mayor Regina Romero. Here. Mayor Paul Diaz.
Here. And we do have a quorum. All right. If everybody could please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Before we get started, I wanted to ask my colleagues if they would be okay with moving our executive session, which is item number 4, to the end of the meeting, since it could be fairly extensive discussion. That way, if we move it to the end of the meeting, we could have the executive session, come back in, adjourn the regional council, and then begin the RTA board meeting. Does anybody have any objections to that? No. Excellent. All right. Thank you very much. And we'll now go to call to the audience. And Mr. Brown, if you could let us know if there are any call to the audience participants.
Here, we probably have new callers.
All right. Very good. And we already discussed moving agenda item number 4 to the end of our meeting. So let's move to number 5, approval of the July 27, 2023 meeting summary and executive session minutes.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion? General Maxwell.
Chair, thank you. I just actually would like to compliment the executive director and the staff. This is, to me, the most thorough job documenting the minutes. And I think it's really important because a lot of times we do go back and refer to what we've said at previous meetings. So whatever led you eventually to do this technique and the system you use for this, I really appreciated it. It was much easier to review as well as to refresh myself on what some of the issues that we discussed at length on the last meeting. So thank you.
Thank you.
I'd like to commend also the work and attach myself to that comment.
Thank you, General Maxwell and Mayor Romero. All in favor of approving the minutes, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion is approved unanimously. We're now going to move on to consent agenda items for information. And we have Mr. Toe from PAG staff to address item 6A.
So, Mr. Chair, this is again for information only. If you have any questions, we'll be happy to answer any questions you have. We do not have a presentation for you.
Okay. Any questions from any of my colleagues? Mayor Romero.
Thank you, Supervisor Scott. My question is that the RTA collections appear to be about $12 million above the adopted budget. How will this overage in revenue be factored into the delivery of the RTA program? We have projects that have been moved. But part of the motion that we moved into the RTA next said that we would use any and all revenues coming into the RTA to complete the 2006 RTA 1 projects. So is there any possibility of getting an update in writing for discussion at a future meeting on how much the RTA has in fund balance? And how do we plan on expending the $12 million or any other possibility for RTA 1 projects?
Thank you, Mayor Romero. And if I could, before I ask Mr. Mogimi to respond, I also have some questions about item number 6A. The project dollars, the projects that these dollars are allocated to, when we get the follow-up that Mayor Romero is asking for, would like an update on their status, and need to also ask it, we need to reallocate any of those funds to get projects that are close to being started moving as soon as possible.
Supervisor Scott, Mayor Romero, be happy to do that. I can send out a memo and obviously discuss it at the next RTA meeting as well. Give more details on status of the projects as well as any excess funds and how that can be allocated to those projects.
And I do know that the item said that we were waiting on fiscal year 2024 figures. And so that these were preliminary, but if we can get something in response to those questions in memorandum form, as you said, and then also discuss them at the December Regional Council meeting.
Be happy to.
Excellent.
And but just
Mayor Murphy.
well, 2 points. One, we have a gentleman walking in right beside you, Joe Winfield.
Hello, Mayor Winfield.
And the other one is, and I know that sometimes municipalities have rollover into the the future year. So if maybe that could be included on what projects should be started or should have been started, and then how the monies would be rolled over and how that things. That could be included as that as well.
And just to clarify, Mayor Murphy, you're asking about rollover of RTA revenues.
Yes.
And Mayor Romero and our questions had more to do with regional funds that are being used to move RTA projects forward.
Right. But it same has the effect on the
Got it.
current RTA projects that were in the pipeline and either started, not started, and how many of those may end up having to be rolled up additionally into the next RTA as well.
Mr. Mogimi.
Chair, Mayor Murphy, excellent point. They're all interrelated, so we'll include all of that in the memo and discuss it at the next two.
Thanks.
All right.
And Mr. Chair,
Yes, ma'am.
just further, just so that I can clarify my question, it would be wonderful to add it into that written memo, reporting to all of us. I have heard that the RTA has a $200 million fund balance, which is wonderful. It's good to have a fund balance. But I don't know exactly if this number has been presented to the board before. I would love to be able to know exactly what the fund balance that we have. Because then it's interrelated, right? If we are getting $12 million overage of what we expected, we also need to know what the healthy fund balance allocation has to be. And so it would be wonderful to know exactly how much is our fund balance at the RTA.
Mr. Chair, Mayor Romero, the RTA budget that was approved in May included the fund balance. Obviously, since May, we've had better than anticipated performance, so that'll be updated as well in the memo.
One last point, Mr. Chair. Also, I know we're looking at also the rising construction costs. So, how that balances out. If, I'm ahead by $5, but if the construction is $10, I'm not really ahead. So I know it's all one big picture. So if you can do it in the
We'll
context.
be happy to make it as comprehensive as possible so you can see both sides of the equation. You're right, it is almost a balancing act. And I think the biggest challenge we have, and you touched on it, was the amounts that are being rolled over. So it goes back to the fund balance. They're all programmed. They're not new money per se. Most of it is already programmed and committed to projects.
And 2 points come to mind, Mayor Murphy, after your comments. One is the presentation that we had previously from the Arizona Transportation Builders Association on the increasing costs. And secondly, was the motion that we passed last time asking the CAC to take into account the new cost estimates when they're putting together the proposal for RTA next. It would certainly be interesting to know if there are similar impacts on projects in the current RTA.
Thank you. And if you don't mind, I would like to come back to that during the RTA meeting. We can discuss that a little bit further.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Any other comments on item 6A? Right, item 6B is program highlights report. Any questions or comments from board members, council members, that is? I had a couple of questions, Mr. Mogimi. These activity reports, are these prepared just for the regional council, or who else do they go to?
So it's prepared by staff. All of our directors and managers work through within the individual divisions prepare the document. We share it initially with the regional council, and then it's available to anyone else that's interested, obviously. Periodically during different meetings, those conversations come up and copies are sent out to anyone that's interested.
Because one of the things that we've been discussing in conjunction with another matter is the central importance of the OWP. But we had a discussion as a county team in preparation for this meeting, is that the lists of activities are not really connected with the work elements in the OWP. And wonder if that is something that we could do with future reports. The first,
Yeah, we can rearrange it. It's mainly driven based on which division is working on what activity, but we can associate it to OW activities.
and how do those three broad categories, mobility, sustainability, livability, how do those connect with the work elements in the OWP?
Well, I would like to think that everybody agrees that's our overarching umbrella throughout the years as part of development of the OWP. We've always used those as an overarching umbrella and the mission of the organization. So they're really more categorized within those areas. But again, if we want to be more systematic, we can reference it back to an OWP, but still keep it under those umbrellas.
Well, I know we would appreciate that as a county team, if that's of interest to other members of the council, if we could do that with future reports. All right. We don't need a formal motion for that, do we, Mr. Benavides? Thank you. All right, and then the contracts and agreements report, item 6C. Any questions or comments from council members? All right. I don't know if I'm going to meet your 30-minute standard, Mayor Honey, but I'm looking along here. Right, item number 7, regional mobility and accessibility plan update. And how do you pronounce your last name?
It's Diren.
Thank you. I never have to say, first time I'm chairing, so I haven't had to say it, Jeanette. Thank you.
That's okay.
Jeanette Duren will present to the council on this topic.
Mr. Chair, members of the Regional Council, thanks for having me back again. As I just said, my name is Jeanette Diren, Transportation Planning Director. Wanted to talk to you a little bit about our Regional Mobility and Accessibility Plan. This is tends to be a standing agenda item, so I've heard it before, but this is our long-range plan, and it's our federally required document. So of course, we're right in the midst of updating the document and putting it all together to bring forward to this group, hopefully next year. That's our goal. So where we're at right now is we're in the process of working on our project list. So as you guys know, that projects, in order for them to receive funding in the TIP, they have to be in the long-range plan. So we're working with our TPC partners and your staff to make sure that that project list accurately reflects what we think is going to happen in the region over the next 20, 30 years. That's an undertaking, especially because the last time we did the project list was prior to Tucson and prior to some other planning efforts from ADA and other jurisdictions that we're trying to fold in. So I wanted to publicly say thank you to your teams for working with us and all the effort that they put in. We have a Project Explorer tool, which I know we've presented in this group before, but what it is it's really a repository of all of our information that goes into the different projects, the scope, location, cost, and all the performance data. So in putting all that together, we had a deadline of last week for all the jurisdictions to get their information in. So what that means now is we're taking it over and we're looking at where there are some updates that need to be made, or if there's discrepancies, or just trying to clean it up and make sure that we have a good starting place for discussion. We're also updating our performance data. So all of the data sets that go into analyzing the projects and into decision-making for the long-range plan, all those data sets get updated periodically. We're making sure that they are all in a good place so that we can continue our work on the long-range plan. So now that the Explorer is opened and everybody's met their deadline, we're going in, we're cleaning up projects, and we're making sure that our costs are also accurately reflected. Our jurisdiction TPC partners took the first cut at that, putting their project estimates in, and we're taking a look at those, make sure that they make sense and that the projects are accurately portrayed in the Project Explorer. We had some one-on-one meetings. Even today, we had a one-on-one meeting with our jurisdictions to make sure that everybody's on the same page on what we're doing and how their work is fitting into the whole process. So that's been a really great exercise to see new faces and new people getting in there and learning the process. We're also working on some of our base maps and updating our geometry for different projects to make sure that everything is accurately portrayed. So when those project lists come forward, everything matches what's the expectation. We also are going to be holding a pop tech meeting next month, and we're going to be looking through some of our data sets, particularly our permitting data and our employment projections with that technical committee to make sure that everything is ready to go for our modeling efforts. As always, we continue to work with the RTA staff, making sure that we're following closely with the RTA Next effort, because everything that is reflected in the RTA plan is going to also be reflected in the long range plan. That's all I have this time. Do you have any questions?
Mr. Chair, just a quick one on when the new cost estimates came in from the municipalities. I mean, surprises, or was it, we're hearing from 40 when we were at the ATB, 40 to 100%. Is that accurate, or just can you touch on
It
that?
varies on, project by project. Some estimates were pretty accurate. Some of them have changed. So that's really been an effort that Rick has been working on with the HDR team. But when it comes to the RMAP, we are going to make sure that those most recent cost estimates are reflected in the long range plan. So many of your TPC staff members have included those cost estimates in this round. But we will be watching and making sure that those are accurately reflected forward.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
Any other questions or comments? All right,
Okay,
thanks
thank you.
very much. We're now going to move on to item number 8, fiscal year 2022 to 2026 Transportation Improvement Program TIP Amendment. And Mr. Brown is here.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the Regional Council. Appreciate the opportunity to introduce this action item, which is an amendment to the PAG 2022-2026 Transportation Improvement Program, or TIP. As described in the meeting packet, TIP Amendment 2022.070 would program $1.814 million of ADOT Regional Highway User Revenue 2.6 funds in fiscal year 2024 on TIP ID 10.18. This is the Sunset I-10 to River Road project, which is an RTA roadway element project. Based on Arizona State Transportation Board policy, HERF 26 funds can only be used on state facilities. Mr. Rod Lane, ADOT South Central District Engineer, is here today and can help address any questions about the funding source as it pertains to this project. Also, the packet includes a letter from Pima County staff explaining the need for the additional funding. Please note that the additional funding will be used for the ADOT portion of the right-of-way improvements. The Transportation Planning Committee recommended approval of this TIP amendment at the August 16th meeting. The Management Committee recommended approval of the TIP amendment at the September 13th meeting. And with that, Mr. Chair, that concludes my introduction, and I'm happy to take questions. Thank you.
Any questions for Mr. Brown? Questions for Mr. Lane or Pima County staff? All right, since this is a Pima County project, I will move the item.
I'll second.
Thank you, Mayor Murphy.
Welcome.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, thank you, Mr. Brown.
Thank you.
We're now on to item number 9, PAG 2023 Title VI Implementation Plan. Mr. McLaughlin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the Regional Council. My name is Preston McLaughlin. I am the Transportation Mobility Coordinator and Title VI Coordinator for PAG RTA. Today, I would like to discuss PAG's Title VI plan for 2023 and request approval of this amendment for this year. Title VI of the 1964 Civil Rights Act requires that any federally funded planning, programming, and project implementation activities be free of discrimination on the basis of race, color, or national origin. The Pima Association of Governments currently receives federal funding from the Federal Highways Administration, FHWA, from the region's transportation planning projects. Therefore, PAG must comply with these federal requirements. The Arizona Department of Transportation, ADOT, requires that PAG's Title VI plan, non-discrimination policy, and limited English proficiency plan be reviewed and approved by the regional council on an annual basis. As the state subrecipient of federal funds, staff have worked hand in hand with ADOT's Civil Rights Office to confirm that this Title VI plan meets all federal requirements. On August 17th, 2023, ADOT Civil Rights Office used the FHWA's Title VI implementation plan checklist to confirm the PAG's Title VI plan contained all the information necessary to meet federal requirements. Additionally, staff have added a section within this year's plan to describe how PAG adheres to the 1994 Executive Order on Environmental Justice by including low-income, elderly, and disabled populations in its analysis, mapping, and public outreach efforts. This Title VI plan outlines the manner in which PAG's federally funded transportation projects comply with the requirements of Title VI, as well as how PAG responds to complaints or allegations of discrimination. The plan contains the procedures for filing a Title VI complaint, as well as a copy of the Title VI complaint form, which is available in both English and Spanish. So with that, I would like to request the approval of this plan with the regional council. So PAG is in complete compliance with ADOT and the FHWA. And I'm also happy to try and answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
Questions or comments from council members? Mayor Romero?
Thank you. I always think I have to press a button. Thank you so much. I really appreciate having this and considering the items separately. As you all well know, I have been asking about Title VI and the very limited amount of work that PAG has been doing in terms of both Title VI and advancing racial equity, also attending to the Justice 40, which is what President Biden's administration has been pushing for with Title VI and the implementation. Who's our Title VI coordinator? Because some part of our documents say Preston is, others say David Zinda, others say Zonia Kelly.
Sure.
I would be the
Mayor
Title VI
Romero,
coordinator currently.
David used to be our coordinator. Now Preston is the coordinator. Kelly provides translation services if anybody needs translation services. So that's why she's identified.
Okay,
But Preston is our coordinator.
so there is a staff person available if there's any Spanish language questions or concerns.
Miss Kelly.
I noticed that the executive order 13985, advancing racial equity and support for underserved communities through the federal government, dated January 20th, 2021, and its corresponding update dated February 16, 2023, executive order 14091, which further advances equity and support by extending and strengthening equity advancing requirements for agencies are not mentioned anywhere in this implementation plan. Basically, these orders take a whole of government approach to advancing equity for all. USDOT's Equity Action Plan was developed in response to that 2021 executive order. One of the focus areas in this plan is called Power of Community. And through the focus area, USDOT aims to increase the number of state DOTs and MPOs officially adopting a quantitative equity screening component, meaning that it has to have meaningful representation and that there's representative public involvement processes. Additionally, as part of the Justice 40, USDOT will also encourage state departments of transportation and MPOs receiving formula funding to prioritize these projects. In this way as well, using a quantitative equity screening by having meaningful and representative public processes. So several MPOs around the country are using these equity screening tools and putting their public processes. So what I see is that determining Title VI and environmental justice compliance by only reviewing travel time, level of service, and traffic delays misses the entire mark of the purpose of Title VI. And it really misses the mark as to what we're doing as a regional council to improve equity and mobility to all residents in our region. Does PAG use any of the GIS-based equity screening tools provided by the FHWA?
Yes, Mr. Chair, Mayor Romero. So again, this document identifies how we will implement and comply with all the regulations throughout our processes, whether it's RMAP or TIP. And yes, to answer your question, that screening process is used during the RMAP process, and then as part of the TIP process, it's identified in the document. So those individual documents go through those steps and they comply with those regulations.
What are the ones that you use and how are these applied?
Which, I'm sorry, can you
The screening tools?
can you rephrase the question? The screening tool? Justice 40 is used as a GIS screening tool that is currently used for, even with the RTA next, we used it. We're going to use it for RMAP. Once we have the universe of projects in the RMAP, we'll use it.
I'm sorry, Mr. Mogimi. I was talking about GIS based.
Yeah, it's a GIS
based
map.
equity screening.
Yep.
I think Mr. Brown had some input to share.
I may, Mr. Chair, Ms. Mohimi,
Please.
Mayor Romero. So PAG recently issued a call for projects for transportation. We recently issued a call for projects for transportation alternatives projects, which are bicycle and pedestrian projects. And we followed the federal guidance on that. And as part of the Justice 40 initiative, the guidance had changed. And it includes prioritizing high need areas as part of the competitive selection process. In coordination with the state, which is a requirement, the state is using a screening tool from the USDOT that's affiliated with Justice 40 as a way of identifying those high need areas. And we've incorporated that into our process with an appendix that guides the applicants to that screening tool with screen captures on how to identify those disadvantaged areas, those high need areas for scoring.
Thank you. That's exactly what I wanted to hear. You know, even though we're using these screening tools, throughout my time at the PAG Council, I've been talking about this and my discontent. The very little attention that is being put to strengthening our implementation of Title VI and environmental justice principles. Our federal government has issued guidance on equity and transportation planning and implementation that completely aligns with what I've been asking for some time. My belief is that advancing regional equity and addressing environmental justice are the right thing to do. Beyond that, though, on a very pragmatic note, we will be more competitive for federal funding and technical assistance if our regional plans are updated, not just to check Title VI implementation boxes, but also demonstrate our commitment to improving transportation equity and addressing environmental justice. So unfortunately, back in 2021 and 2022, I voted no on PAG's Title VI implementation plan. And I'm equally disappointed this year to see the same level of analysis in this document as previous years, which is why, unfortunately, again, I will be voting no. I don't think this implementation plan really addresses issues of equity in our region. And this is not just based on income, but it's also based on ADA accessibility issues and lack of focus on how to move us forward in terms of design.
Mr. Chair.
I think Mayor Honey was next.
Okay. I always defer to my elders. Thank you.
Oh, wow. The chair notes that Mayor Murphy is living dangerous.
So noted.
Mr. Brown, do we adhere to all the Title VI regulations put forward by the state of Arizona?
That is correct, yes.
I, with all respect to Mayor Romero, I think what we're trying to do here is say that we will adhere to state regulations in order for us to either exchange funds or services with the state of Arizona and ADOT. If the mayor wishes to have an expanded regulations on things we do, I think it would be appropriate to do it separately, but not in this particular item. And I think this is just an item saying to the state, yes, we will do your Title VI regulations. Our community, Marana, does as well. And, you know, I think if we can get too far in the weeds with some of the things the mayor's asking for. Thank you.
Mayor Coney, Mayor Murphy.
No, I was just gonna ask the tools that the mayor pointed out. I think I heard we are using all of those particular tools, whether it's the GIS map or everything else. Is that an accurate statement that all of the tools that were referenced are being applied in our process?
To my understanding, yes. Maybe Jamie would have additional information on that. Or Jeanette.
Mr. Chair, members of the Regional Council. Yes, so my understanding of Justice 40 is that it's spread across different federal highways programs. So I mentioned the transportation alternatives programs, and the requirements are embedded now with transportation alternatives. So you can look at the fact sheet, you can look at the regulations. You can look at the regulations, you can look at the fact sheet, and you can see how it's changed. And we're incorporating tools like this GIS Justice 40 map that the USDOT prepared as part of that process for the RMAP. I don't know if there's anything you wanted to add.
Mr. Chair, members of the Regional Council. Yeah, so Jamie touched upon it, but yeah, with the new RMAP, it is definitely something we're looking into and we're actually working on pretty heavily. We're in a partnership with SunCloud, and SunCloud has put together tools based off the USDOT equity tools, and they've even taken it one step further. So instead of looking at simply, are we doing projects that are near or in proximity to disadvantaged communities, we're actually looking at, are the facilities serving those communities? So it's not as simple as, okay, this is where our disadvantaged communities are we investing money there? But we're really looking at how are they getting to their places of work? How are they traveling across the region? How are they getting to other jurisdictions and those types of activities? So we're really taking a more in-depth look at how they're traveling and where they're going and how they're getting there, so that we can analyze where our investments are in relationship to their travel patterns, not just their neighborhood or their community. So we are, now that we have access to a lot of these tools and we have these partnerships, we're going to continue to implement them as we move through it. One of the first steps that we took was incorporating those disadvantaged community data layers into the RTA Next project portal, so that information was available. But we're continuing to expand upon that, and as new information is available that we can pull into our analysis tools, we're going to continue to do so.
Thank you. Can I just do a quick follow-up?
Please.
So it's really not just a compliance. We really are trying to get to the point that we're serving the residents that need to be served in this way.
Mr. Chair, Mayor Murphy, yes, in terms of this agenda item, this is, to meet our federal requirement. That's why
Right.
we do this. But yes, taking it a step further and applying it into the projects that we do is what Jamie and I have been working on, as well as our transit.
Thank you.
General Maxwell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I truly want to understand. I've heard that this is fulfilling two different roles. One is just letting ADOT know we're doing things the way we're supposed to. And one is, the title of it is the implementation plan. So I do agree that everything in here puts us in compliance with what ADOT's requirements are. I guess my question is this the implementation plan that PAG as a region we follow? Is there anything that prevents us from putting more in there? Because if it's just a rubber stamp something, then I got a problem with the document being developed as a whole, even if it's ADOT's requirement. So can you explain what
Sure,
this is? This
yeah.
our implementation plan, or is it ADOT's? Because it's not ADOT's.
Mr. Chair, Joel Maxwell, the requirement is a federal requirement. ADOT is delegated to oversee the development of an implementation plan. They require a very scriptive process when they want to make sure that certain things are identified and essentially a commitment for us to implement these actions into all of our future products. So it's simply a checklist of what are the things that we are going to keep an eye on, implement, integrate, ultimately have a product that's in compliance. So it's if I was going to put a different name to it, it would have been an action plan. It's an action plan that we are going to be doing these things. They call it an implementation plan. We follow their criteria.
Yeah, I guess I appreciate that answer, Executive Director, because I understand that piece of it. I guess what I was trying to come to is if it was just filling that square, then all the implementations plans for every MPO in the state would look identical. And I guess my question is that the intention, or is this really where we put what we want to implement into it? That's because otherwise, if that's not the case, then you're right. We should just vote on this and move forward. But if it's an implementation plan for our region, then
Good question again. And we had this conversation before. Actually, David Zinda from our team did a really good research to compare. Ours is as comprehensive as anybody else in the state. He even compared us with other states. He even compared us with other cities that have federal Title VI documents, and they are all similar, following the same criteria.
thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Chair.
Mayor Romero.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And I appreciate that you're using Justice 40 screening tools. Are there any other screening tools that are available that we're not using?
Speak on that.
Sure, Mr. Chair, Mayor Romero. There are a plethora of different screening tools and different ways to go about it. The one that we really vested in is SunCloud. And it really is, I would say it's the most innovative. I
What is
get
it
excited
called
about
again?
these things. It's SunCloud.
SunCloud?
SunCloud, yep. It really does take it and the next step and the next level. It's a effort that we've partnered with MAG, and they're contributing to it as well. So that it really folds in the USDOT tool and kind of takes it one step further. So we're happy to be working with them and working on that, because it goes beyond just what hit the first steps of diving in, and it builds upon that.
Just to follow up on the questions from Mr. Maxwell. I guess what I see in this implementation plan is I see that all that Title VI concerns are being checked. But what I don't see is really an implementation plan as to how we implement Title VI in our region. And also in terms of going above and beyond reviewing only travel times, level of service, and traffic delays. Glad to hear that we're using SunCloud, which is good. But for me, it's really, what is the implementation, right? What do we have to implement to make our systems of transportation and transit better for the entire region? That's what I don't see. And in the implementation plan report, you talk about environmental justice and Justice 40, and this is our draft plan, that there's broad overlap in the application of Title VI and the advancement of the principles of environmental justice, and that the Justice 40 is an initiative coming from presidential executive order that outlines the goal that at least 40% of the benefits from certain federal grants flow to disadvantaged communities. ADA and environmental justice considerations. And so I don't see that in this implementation plan. Maybe you can point me to it.
Mr. Chair, Madam Mayor, again, individual documents, the long-range plan itself has a whole section on how that is being implemented and it's addressed in those individual documents. This document is not intended to get into how those are going to be
Well, that's what
addressed.
this document, which is an implementation plan, is supposed to describe.
No, again, with all due respect, this is an action plan. Individual documents will have those sections in them and they will describe how we are going to address Justice 40 in the long range plan, in the long range transit plan. If it's it. Those documents are to be developed and every single document will have that additional information in it.
Mr. Chair, correct me if I'm wrong. I think a lot of it is in the terminology of the implementation plan. Because I go back to our attorney's comments, deviation from these standards is discovered because PAG is rigorously audited for compliance and its state and federal funding jeopardized with non-compliance. So really this, I think it's a bad title of what it's called. I think some are understanding it as the future plans that will be coming out where it's implemented. This is saying that we are going to abide by the standards under ADOT. So I think to me, it's a little bit of a terminology misunderstanding as opposed to this is the document where we're actually going to be implementing. Those are the future plans that we implement as we move forward. This is the compliance document, the way I understand it. Thomas, would that be somewhat accurate or?
No, it'd be very accurate.
Thank you.
Mayor Honey.
I'd like to make a motion.
Well, I wanted to make sure there were no further questions or comments. And Mayor Winfield.
I'll just say a motion allows for further discussion. So I think a motion is appropriate to ask for a motion second and then continue discussion. But when it's left without a motion, then it's just about an opportunity to end the discussion.
No, thank you for saying that. Go ahead, Mayor Honey.
Okay, I move to adopt the ADOT approved 2023 PAG Title VI improvement plan
I second.
Improvement or implementation?
or implementation plan.
That I don't like the title of, that's okay.
I don't see well. I'll second.
I think that was already seconded by Mayor Winfield. Any further discussion? General Maxwell.
I just want to say, I think PAG as a whole are doing all the things we're required to do. And we're doing some things using systems that are maybe above and beyond too. What I'd ask, and it's the same thing we did last time we voted on Title VI, that there's stuff that I know we're doing that perhaps inclusion in here addresses some of the mayor's concerns and also still it's just a action plan to go by it. So I think we can look at that. And if not, we really simplify it, take it down and make a point of how you say it's being done now in the individual plans. But I think that's what's leading to the confusion. I don't think it's what we're actually doing. I think it's how we are showing it on documentation. But I will be a yes today.
Mayor Romero.
Mr. Chair, I believe that it would be appropriate to ask for a presentation to have Mr. Mogimi show us exactly where Justice 40 and Title VI implementation pieces are within our language planning. It shouldn't be confusing to the public or to any one of us as to where exactly how we're implementing environmental justice compliance within our plan. And again, as I stated the last 2 years when I voted no on Title VI implementation plan, it's not enough to just do enough. Justice 40 and Title VI, according to USDOT, really has meaningful representative public processes involved. And I don't believe we have that with this implementation.
With that thought in mind, and also with the comments that General Maxwell made, could the council get some documents that were produced for previous implementation plans as an example of what you were saying, Mr. Mogimi, in response to General Maxwell's question. I mean, that would be, I think, aligned with the request that Mayor Romero just made for a presentation. It would also allow us to see some historical examples of how other documents spell out some of the details that aren't in the implementation plan.
Sure, be happy to do that. Again, it'll be the tip, RMAP, and the transit long range plan that were relatively recent, but keep in mind, most of those were prior to the current executive order. So everything else that we're talking about in the future will include the executive order, but those documents would be a good representation of how it's addressed on those individual documents.
I think those previous documents would be foundational and could help the council to understand how the president's order would be implemented into future
Yeah,
documents.
but that's where we can get into more details that here's how each document will implement the new executive order requirements.
Okay. Mayor Honey, did you have a question?
No, I was just gonna call for the question.
All right. So called. Are we just doing a voice vote or do we do a roll call vote for this, Jack?
Whatever you prefer.
All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed?
Yay, I vote no.
Item passes with Mayor Romero opposed.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the Regional Council.
Thank you, Mr. McLaughlin, Mr. Brown, Mr. Rennie. All right, we're now going to go to item number 10, 2023 Regional Orthophoto Acquisition, Mead Meyer.
Afternoon. Sorry, I'm going to hold this. Good afternoon, Chair and Regional Council. I'm Mead Meyer. I am a planning manager at PAG and oversee the GIS program. I'm speaking today about your action item to vote on the Regional Orthophotography Acquisition Program. This is coordinated every other year to complement the Pima County Assessor Office data and to create the scope and the specifications for this year's program. We coordinated the Regional Data Working Group, which is composed of all the GIS leads from the local jurisdictions to advise this year's acquisition. What they had preferred and recommended was 4,000 square miles of Eastern Pima County. So that's all of Eastern Pima County, not just the urban area. It's a 4-band acquisition, which allows greater analysis. And they also advise something a little bit new to add in the raw data for PAG's ownership, which is a point cloud of data from which we can create planimetric analysis that has gone into things like the sun cloud to delineate things like where sidewalks are and bike lanes and such. So with that, we created an RFP in May, request for proposals. I received several applications and the Regional Data Working Group participated in a review panel and unanimously recommended Digital Mapping Inc. They had the highest scores for qualifications, experience, and price. And if this is approved for our executive director to execute the contract, the data would be made available by summer 2024. And so we'd be ready to run the program again in 2025. And this data is a higher resolution than is acquired at the national level. We rely on coordination with our local jurisdictions to create this regionally reliable, consistent data set that unifies everyone's efforts for this better price. The background.
Questions or comments for Ms. Meyer?
I move to approve.
I'll second.
Moved and seconded by Mayor Winfield and Mayor Murphy. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Item passes unanimously. Thank you very much, Ms. Meyer. We're now going to go to carbon reduction program funding. This item was put on the agenda at the request of Mayor Romero, so I'm going to turn to her first.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Really appreciate it. I requested this item because I am aware that, or concerned, accurately describes my feelings, that $6.3 million of the anticipated $11.5 million of carbon reduction programming funding made available to the PAG region through the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act has already been programmed into our PAG overall work program to support long-standing activities that PAG has already been performing without a meaningful discussion with the regional council or other relevant PAG committees about the optimal use of this critical new funding source. And so I just wanted us as a council to have a discussion about it. I know that there are questions that I and the community have. It seems to me that the actions of budgeting more than $6.3 million of new money coming through the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act is at odds with what other MPOs across the country are doing and with what we would like to discuss here at this table to use these federal formula funds for. So I know that Maricopa Association of Governments is doing a request for proposals. There are other cities around the country or MPOs around the country that are aligning the CRP funds with the actual goals of reducing carbon emissions in their regions. And so I'm concerned that as a region, we are really not truly utilizing these funds to the fullest potential so that we could achieve the stated goals of reducing carbon emissions in our region. So that's the reason why I wanted to bring this item to the table, because there are a lot of questions that I have that I would like answered. First, have there been any committees in charge of giving input to this process been consulted in how we use these?
Want to do your questions one at a time?
Mhm.
Mr. Mogimi?
Mr. Chair, if I may, I need to provide the introduction. Obviously, you have a memo in your packet as well that I describe the process and the reason for building a foundation. And so hopefully you all had a chance to review that document. You also have a side on your table, you have a table side document that really helps describe the process, the goals and objectives of the program. And what's really critical for everyone to recognize is that we are in a very proactive position. We're fortunate we don't have the same air quality pollution issues as some of the other larger cities our size or larger. So they are reacting. They are reacting to issues, and some of them have been working on this for many years. We have not. This is a brand new opportunity for us as a region to proactively develop and have a foundation that we can build on. Now, to answer the question, in order to build a foundation, you have to have a plan, and then you have to have a foundation, and then you get to the point that you start identifying how are you going to start implementing those initiatives. So typically, what we do as part of our overall work program, we develop the proposal. The proposal was shared with at least 3 different committees. Ultimately, it was approved by regional council. Regional council had a proposal at 2 different meetings, one for information, one for action. Committees had opportunities to review and comment. We even gave management committee over a month to review and comment. We only received 1 comment from 1 entity. So everybody had an opportunity to weigh in. And I think for the most part, at least some of the folks that I've talked to, they really truly understood the importance of building a plan and a foundation before we do anything else. So starting to lay the bricks was not anybody's desire. Nobody asked me, let's start laying bricks. Everybody agreed that building the foundation is critical. And that's what you have in the overall working plan, to build the foundation. And what you have in front of you is really helps describe how do you build a foundation for a brand new program with the funding that's now available to us. Again, I said some of the other communities don't enjoy what we're enjoying currently because they have been under federal mandate to perform without any federal funding in some cases. And in some cases, they had federal funding, which was not enough. So we're really in a good position to be able to build a foundation and then make sure that as we start laying the bricks, we're doing the things that truly have a meaningful return on that investment. So how do we propose to do that? First column, collect data and establish some of those benchmarks. So one of the things we want to do is to have a household survey, which we have not done in almost a decade, to do a household survey to really truly understand travel patterns and start assessing how we can start identifying where we can put a dent into this initiative and this goal. And that we just talked about the orthophotography. As part of the orthophotography, now the technology is so sophisticated that we can extract more data just from the ortho and be able to bring that data into our planning process. And then our active transportation modeling, which goes back to our transportation modeling, relatively new. We are trying to expand and build that modeling process. We can build these goals and objectives into the modeling process that now we have really good data to be able to use. And then ultimately be able to use all that information to inform all of our plans moving forward. So again, long range plan, transit plan, active transportation mode plan, which is one of the initiatives on here as well. And that's where you have ongoing monitoring of traffic counts, developing the plans we talked about, even a micro transit option as a plan, and then ultimately promoting carpooling and vanpooling as one of the really low-hanging fruits for the objectives of the carbon reduction program. And then ongoing long-term, even beyond the current legislation and the current funding mechanism, as we all know, these funding mechanisms, they come and go, the amounts will be reduced or increased into the future. We're hopeful there's going to be more grant opportunities. But if we can monitor and track and really have a system in place, we can compete for those future grants, and we can actually have the tool that demonstrates as we go after those other grants that we are, as a region, able to address and utilize those funds. And why do I say that? Because even the current transportation plan has a lot of opportunities for competitive grants. And if we have this tool in place, we can compete and we can actually go after additional federal funding. So that's why it's designed the way it's designed. It requires a regional approach. And again, the regional council, obviously, you have an opportunity to review it and tell us if that's a good approach or not. But we're working towards this plan. Our team has been very focused on it, and we really want to make sure that we have something that stands out. Even working with our partners at MAG, they're not at this level, and they've been working on it for years. And we hope that we have a system in place that really truly demonstrates how we're going to achieve, track, and report towards the reduction of the carbon as a goal.
Mayor Honey.
Sure.
Oh, wait, I'm sorry.
I was
You're still, go ahead, please.
the question wasn't answered.
I think he mentioned the 3 committees that it's been presented to.
The OWP was presented. There was not any consultation about how these new funds were going to be used. So again, have the committees in charge of giving input, consultant on how these new funds were going to be used.
Okay, Madam Mayor.
And I'm talking specifically the TPC and the EPAC.
Management Committee, TPC, and EPAC, they all had this conversation. They all had an opportunity to discuss, and we only comments from one end.
It appears from the materials that this new funding is being used to supplant services we are already delivering. as a region and not focusing on specific carbon reduction as intended. Can you explain that?
I'm not sure whose opinion that is, but I don't agree with that opinion. We are very focused on what we are just described to ensure that we build the foundation.
Mr. Mogimi, the city of Tucson just went through a climate action and adaptation plan. And I absolutely agree that we have to have planning processes to set our goals and to know where we're going, especially with carbon reduction and climate action planning. It took us 14 months with extensive public engagement with our community, thousands of hours of engagement. That particular plan cost the city of Tucson $500,000. You are expending $6 million in the next 3 years. And we really I do not understand what will be new off of those $6 million. And we, this council, had not been given an opportunity to explicitly talk about the $11 million for carbon reduction, which are new funds that are coming to our community. So, excuse me if it's not satisfactory for me to just hear that the OWP is an area where you put this information. I think, as you had mentioned in your memo, we are committed to reviewing data derived from various activities with respective committees throughout the planning process over the next 2 years. How are we involving our committees in planning for these funds? Not reviewing the OWP, reviewing what we're about to set to do, expending $6 million of new funding explicitly to be used for carbon reduction.
And Mr. Chair, Mayor Romero, we just approved the OWP. We are building the foundation, and throughout the next 2 years, we will go back to individual committees with additional data, information, and actions that will be taken over the next 2 years. So all of that is yet to come. If you recall at the last meeting, we're coordinating with ADOT. The legislation required to have a plan in place by November of 2023. ADOT's plan will be finalized by then. Our plan was developed earlier in coordination with ADOT and FHWA. We believe we're aligned with them. But again, over the next 2 years, we need to continue to demonstrate that alignment and continue to implement the plan. So the implementation will be coming. We will be going to individual committees for additional.
Who helped you make that decision though? So for example, let me give you an example. The city of Tucson received new formula funding from HUD and Home, federal government, which is usually goes to our Housing Community Development Department, new funds. And usually the city manager brings it to mayor and council to talk about the new funds and say, there's new funds that are coming in, and you as a policy and budgeting body need to help give us direction as to what you want to do. Did that ever happen here in this particular case? Did you ever bring this item for us to give some direction as to what we should do with these money? Because it's really a lot of money, $6.3 million for carbon reduction. I just want to know how we arrived at the $6.3 million being dedicated to plan.
Sure, Mr. Chair, Madam Mayor. As soon as the legislation was approved, we had conversations with our ADOT representatives as well as the FHWA representatives. They provided the guidelines. And from day one, everybody knew that we have 2 years to develop a plan. And last December, I believe, or it might have been January, we had the draft OWP with this information in it. We presented to the regional council for information only. From January through May, we had multiple committees review and provide information. Regional Council talked about carbon reduction program at the May meeting, and it was approved at the May meeting. So there's ample opportunity for Regional Council, management, TPC, EPAC to provide feedback and information. And it was approved by Regional Council in May.
So again, were there explicit conversations at the committees in charge of giving you input on these funds, on how to use these funds? Was there a vote?
I
Was
believe
there
there was.
recommendation in terms of, yes, let's put $6 million into the planning process, let's put it back into activities that we're already doing? Was there an explicit vote?
There was conversation at all committee levels. We provided an opportunity for written comments and questions. We only received comments from one entity. We did respond to those questions. There was no other request for any other additional information.
Can I interject just for a second? You're referring to comments for the overall OWP, that there was only one response from one entity, but I think Mayor Romero's questions have to do with the carbon reduction program and the conversation that occurred specifically in those two committees. As you said in your memo, we have thoroughly reviewed the approach with our committees, and we are committed to reviewing data derived from various activities with respective committees throughout the planning process over the next 2 years.
Correct. And I don't have the dates, but we did have that conversation at TPC and EPAC, and we plan to continue to have that conversation.
So if I could just carry on with that, this document says that we're currently at the stage of collecting data and establishing benchmarks. There's right around $11 million in CRP funds. We've expended or planning to expend more than half of them on collecting data and establishing benchmarks. Are you saying that those two committees, as well as the regional council will be involved in the establishment of the benchmarks?
Of course, again, we'll continue to bring the information back to the committees and the regional council to make sure everybody's informed, because this is a brand new program for the region. And ultimately, again, the decision is going to be made by the regional council. How are we going to continue to fund this program in the future if there is no funding, because we're not mandated to do so? So that's the ongoing conversation. But from my perspective, we are in a really good position to have a program in place to proactively address carbon reduction and emissions issues, because we're not in a position to be mandated to do it. Once we're in a position to be mandated to do it, we're talking millions of dollars that may be even unfunded mandates. So I really welcome this opportunity to put ourselves in a position that we'll never have to be mandated by the federal government to do so.
Mayor Honig.
No, I'll pass.
Mayor Romero. Oh, go ahead, General.
Could I just, so I, as hard as it might be to believe, I read through the entire document on this thing, and I'll tell you, the carbon reduction program is definitely flexible. There's no doubt about it. I mean, there's a lot of things, different ways you can use it. So I don't necessarily want to get into the details of how we're using it on this one, because I think even from this plan, you're using it how you can. I guess my question for you is, executive directors, when these funds were incorporated into the plan for the OWP that we only got one comment back for, were they identified at the time as being the CRP funds? Because they're very flexible. Agree, there's a lot of different ways we can use these, but was it identified as it was going through the process and to include when we approved it last time as we are using CRP funds in these categories? And if the answer is yes, that's great.
So yes, Mr. Chair, General Maxwell, we are required to identify the funding source for each element. So it is identified as CRP funds eligible for the use of certain uses.
Was it brought up to us specifically as such? And I'm just asked that because then it's our fault if we're not recalling.
Yes,
So
we have that conversation.
The other thing I'd like to ask you to expand a little bit so everybody understands, because you've alluded to the difference between us and Maricopa, but I can tell you it is a huge difference. They are in the process, and as they are looking to go to different levels of their current air quality, it brings a lot of federal oversight, a lot of federal restrictions and other things. So it's a big deal in a community like Maricopa. You've alluded several times, and this, I'm hoping the answer is going to be what I expected to be, but you alluded at several times that while we're still collecting data and benchmarks right now on ways we can fix it, could you just describe real quick the current quality, air quality ratings we have compared to those in Maricopa and where we sit, so that we have time to create a system like you're talking about to improve it going forward?
Yes, so I don't have the standards off the top of my head, but obviously ozone is more of a concern for us. We have been working with our partners to make sure that we meet the ozone standards, because that was changed recently. That was actually lowered recently. So indirectly, we are in a kind of a yellow zone for making sure that we have a plan in place. As far as carbon monoxide goes, we are in a really good position. We're nowhere near those standards. So I think ozone brings a different element to the conversation. But again, we hope that we'll never be in that position. We did present on the ozone levels to the regional council a few years ago. Thanks to our partners at Pima County, we're watching it closely. If that happens, we're talking millions of dollars to be in a non-attainment status, which we hope that that'll never be the case.
Appreciate that. And I know there's different levels, and at some point, maybe in the future, if we can just have that comparison with Maricopa, because it is a serious issue up there that they have to really be aggressive at doing it. I appreciate that explanation.
Mayor Honey.
Okay. I want to kind of add to what General Maxwell was saying. I think twice this year, or maybe it was last year, Phoenix had air quality warnings to where seniors or people with health problems were asked to stay indoors and not even go outside. We don't have anything close to that here. So trying to use Maricopa as a comparison, we don't have the same problems. Maricopa's in a hole. They have more heat. They have more stuff going on, and their air quality is always going to be worse than ours. In fact, we've had issues to where the big cloud from Maricopa, if the winds are right, actually blow up this way from Maricopa County. You could actually see it. The air was that dirty. And, I don't think comparing us to Maricopa really solves any of the problems. I think we have pretty good air quality, and what we probably want to do is maintain that. And the question I was going to ask is, a lot of the stuff we look at is, you said carpooling or vans or something like that. And I can tell you there are certain places, and part of them are in Marana, where cars in the rush hour in the afternoon and the morning stack up on the freeway for 2 miles. Would capital improvements, even if we can move that traffic faster, not necessarily us, it could be any of us, would that be improved in the part of the program study as well? As if we find places to where traffic is not moving, we could make it better to move that traffic more quickly, and that would help with air quality as well.
Yes, Mr. Chair, Mayor Honey. Yes, van pooling and carpooling is one of the initiatives identified in our list to encourage more van pooling, provide opportunities and incentives for larger employers to encourage van pooling. So that is part of the plan as well.
Could capital improvements
Yes,
be part of
capital
that?
improvements are eligible for the cover reduction fund.
Mayor Romero.
Yeah, Mayor Honey, I'm not comparing us, and would I ever to Phoenix or Maricopa County? I would never do that to us. But the reason I'm talking about Maricopa Association of Governments is because they had a very well-defined process on how to use this money. Their council spent quite some time in their deliberation of how they would use these funds. I go back to my example of receiving new HUD and home funds from the federal government that we received, the American Rescue Plan. We did not, as a council, have an opportunity to have a discussion as to how to proceed with these funds. And that is one of the reasons why I'm asking, have committees in charge of giving input been consulted on how to use these new funds? Because I know for a fact that we had the carbon reduction. It was not for discussion, it was a presentation to inform us that we were receiving $11 million in the next 5 years. We never, and I will have to ask for any of you to present to us the meeting minutes where we, as a council, had an opportunity to discuss on what processes to use to put these monies to work. I'm happy that you're saying that there's going to be VAMPO and CARPO, but those are ongoing programs. And I still have not received an answer as to why $6.3 million to put a strategic plan together. It should not cost that much. And so that's the only reason I brought up MAG, because they had a very, very different process. They put out a request for proposals in their region in terms of how to use their additional funds. And it could be anywhere from building bike and pedestrian connections to building EV infrastructure, to different infrastructure projects for the region to connect people from transit to their bikes or to walk. And so I still don't understand, to be honest with you, what we're using $6.3 million. And I would highly recommend that we have a thorough discussion. I remember very clearly the meeting where I brought up the carbon reduction program funding. We were discussing OWP. And I asked, like, what are we going to do? It's a program that we can use for many really incredible things, including infrastructure for pedestrians and bikes. And, some communities are using it to pay for electric bikes so that people get off their cars and can use the transit systems and then connect to their last mile. There are many different ways of using these. So I just, again, what is $6.3 million paying for? And how do we continue as a regional council discussing how we use these?
So if I could, going back, Mayor Romero, to your memorandum and the bulleted items therein. And I know from everything that you've been saying, you don't feel that you've gotten responses to those bulleted items. And then going to Mr. Mogimi's memorandum that was written in response to yours, that's at the back of this packet. If you go to the first page and go to the third paragraph, your second sentence says, our approach is intentionally designed to be data-centric, systemic, and sustainable, extending well beyond the typical 5 to 6 year transportation reauthorization cycle. You go down to the next paragraph, second sentence, these strategies endorsed by the Regional Council aim to establish the foundational long planning framework for a sustainable carbon reduction program rather than being reactive to funding isolated projects without a clear means of evaluating their regional effectiveness. It seems to me that if you were to provide us with some direct responses to the bulleted points in Mayor Romero's memorandum, expanding on these points from yours, that all of us would have a clearer picture of the game plan, the long-term game plan.
Happy to. And again, I just want to remind everyone that we are developing the game plan as we speak over the next 2 years. So be happy to put a little bit more context into a follow-up memo. But again, what's in my opinion is important in this process is to really build that foundation together. And building the foundation together is really what I'm describing. That's going to happen over the next 2 years.
But I think if there were some more detail to that, responsive to the points in Mayor Romero's memorandum, it would be more clear, not just to us, but also to the management committee, EPAC, TPC, in terms of their role as well.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Yes.
Chair, I would also like to know exactly how that 6.3 million is being planned to be used. It is an unusually high number to do planning.
So are you saying, Mayor Romero, again, to go back to Mr. Mogimi's memorandum, he has some bulleted items that follow this sentence. The following represents the data-driven integrated planning strategies we are planning to implement to achieve our shared regional objective of reducing carbon emissions from on-road sources. Are you asking to know how much was devoted to each one of those bulleted items?
Yes.
Okay.
And I think that it would be appropriate for this council to share in that decision making.
So
I'd be happy to add the cost to each element. It's already broken down. We'll add the cost.
and could we then have an item on our next meeting where you walk us through all that? Anything else from council members? All right. Thank you all very much. We're now going to go back to item number 4. And I would entertain a motion to go into executive session. So moved by Mayor Honey, seconded by Mayor Winfield. We're doing it. And having no further business for the regional council, I will move we adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
And any objections? All right, we're adjourned and the gavel is now in Mayor Honey's hand.
I've never used one of those. I haven't. That's a true statement. Okay, we'll call the RTA meeting to order. Mr. Brown, do we have any calls to the audience? Approval of the July 27th meeting summary.
So moved.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Meeting passes unanimously.
How easy they go.
Consent agenda, I think we have one item, item A.
Mr. Chair, that's again for information, if there's ever any.
Anybody have a question on that? If not, we'll move on. Procurement of transit business for Sun Shuttle. Mr. McLaughlin. Or
Mr.
is
Chair,
he
I'll,
done?
I'll take that if
Okay,
if I
Mr.
may. This is a request for purchasing 2 electric shuttles for the RTA Sun Shuttle in partnership with the City of Tucson and TEP. RTA received a federal grant to be able to purchase those electric vehicles. RTA's share was for 2 shuttles, and obviously there's a 20% match requirement that the federal grants would allow us to participate in. So this is board's direction to me to authorize me to proceed with the purchase of those 2 vehicles, and be happy to answer any questions. And Preston's here as well. If there's any questions, be happy to answer your questions.
Move to approve.
Second.
Oh, are you taking notes here? Moved and seconded, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
And just, I don't know if there's any opposition, but just to add, I'm really happy to see this moving forward, and the new electric shuttles and EV charging stations are coming to our region as a result of regional collaboration. I'm really happy that we're able to move forward with this.
That was easy. All right. Thank you.
We're good. Okay, item 6, RTA next plan, Mr. Barghemi.
Mr. Chair, members of the board, again, thank you for the opportunity to give you an update on the status of the development of the RTA Next plan. If you recall at the last meeting, the board gave very specific direction to the CAC as well as the TNC to continue to work on developing the draft plan and have it to you at the next meeting in December. We've had multiple meetings with the CAC and at least one meeting with the TMC. The updated cost estimates have been provided to both committees. We have double checked, crossed the T's, dotted the I's. I think everybody's comfortable with the updated cost estimates, but at the same time, it continues to be a challenge because the cost estimates are increasing and the budget is obviously limited. So as part of that exercise, and I'll have Chairman McGovern talk more about that. As part of that effort, the CAC is undertaking a kind of a revisit and ranking of the list of projects. That assignment is due, actually, it was due yesterday, and hopefully we'll have the results for the CAC at their next meeting. So they're looking at rearranging the priority of the 33 projects, as well as seeing what they can fit within the budget. So other than that, we hope to continue to have CAC and TMC to continue to work together, refine the plan, and bring it back to you by December. So both Mr. Rosema and DeBonis, obviously as our CAC liaisons, have been participating as well. But if I may, I can have Mr. McGovern come up and give his update as well.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board.
The CAC is really focused and has been for the last, well, since I last talked to you, on two primary points of emphasis. First being transit. The transit element has been worked and reworked by the committee, by the entire committee. We had originally had a subcommittee which presented kind of a foundational start to that element of the plan. And since then, it's been, as I say, worked some more. And currently, we are looking at both how to distribute money within it, within the element of transit, as well as exactly how much should be allocated to it. And that leads kind of into the second point of emphasis for the committee, which is, as Mr. Mugimi just mentioned, the ranking of projects. We realized that any change in the allocations within each of the elements of the plan would likely, if they impacted the corridor projects, result in reductions of projects that could be funded under that category. The result of that has been that we recognized that there were several ranking exercises that have been done both by the TMC, by the jurisdictions themselves, and by the CAC on a couple of occasions. And as a result, we didn't have really a up-to-date ranking of our projects. And we also recognized, as a result of seeing the cost estimates that came in several $100 million above our kind of benchmark $1.1 billion original estimate, that we definitely had work to do about identifying projects that could be funded with that money. Only to further potentially complicate that, if there is a reduction in the amount of money to be devoted to those named corridor projects, then of course that exercise will have to go another step further, which is to further determine which projects can and can't be built within that category. Hope that didn't get too confusing, but essentially we are in that process, and we have started on and have made some good progress on a couple of exercises. One is to identify those projects necessary. Let me put it a different way. To find out which projects the committee believes should be funded and could be funded with our $1.1 billion benchmark amount for the corridors, knowing that not all of the 33 that had originally made it to this level could be paid for with that limited amount of budget. The second part of the work that we've embarked on is to rank the projects, as Mr. Mugimi mentioned, from 1 to 33. There being 33 projects. We felt that a good starting point for determining where cutoffs would be to say, what is the overall ranking? What does the committee think are the most important and perhaps the least important of those 33 projects? One way to start that process is to rank them from 1 to 33. That's only a starting point, of course, because we still have to look at jurisdictional and geographic spread of projects and understand kind of which projects perhaps are and why they may not show as highly on our scoring, which ones may be higher than the committee believes. So you know that this is kind of where the sausage making is going to occur. And hopefully we'll be getting to that at our next meeting, which is on Monday. So sorry to take so much time explaining where we are, but I thought it might be helpful for you to at least see what our focus is right now and ask if you have any questions.
Mr. Chair, I just had a quick question, Tom. Well, first, thank you for hanging in there. Really appreciate that as always. And do you see the likelihood that by December, you think you could get to a consensus, or do you see as a chance that we may have to get presented two different plans, one probably a little more TMC sort of centric and one CAC? I know you're probably hoping that it doesn't happen, but at some point we have to get something and let the regional council figure out, hopefully unanimously, but at least the majority of to move forward to finally get it to be put out to the voters.
Mr. Mayor, Mayor Murphy, I don't anticipate that that the CAC will fail to present a proposal, and it will be a proposal that has been vetted with the technical management committee as well, and hopefully we do have time for several back and forths. And to the extent that we're able, both of us, able to come to a conclusion, then certainly it's reasonable to expect that you would have that by the December date. I don't know whether it's reasonable that we'll come to an exact agreement. That remains to be seen, but I'm still confident that that can very well happen. I guess I'll leave it at that.
Thanks, appreciate it. And your hard work and effort.
Any other questions?
No.
Mayor Romero.
Thank you so much for your service with the CAC. How, if there's any plans for the CAC to interact with the different jurisdictions, is that planned? How will the CAC and the citizen advisors be able to hear from the different wants and needs from the separate jurisdictions in the region?
Thank you for that question, Mr. Chairman and Mayor Romero. We currently have a process of communicating with the jurisdictions that mostly goes directly through the TMC. And so we'll ask jurisdictions to report back to us through that liaison that we have. And when we have specific questions or requests, that's the pathway that we typically use. I will say with regard to the transit communications we've been having, we've had more conversations directly with the jurisdictions at our meetings and in between. And those are often in the realm of the transit working group, which includes all of the affected transit providers and users in the region. So those are the primary ways that we've been communicating with those jurisdictions, but we regularly have reports from such folks as your DOT director and others. So if anyone feels that there's a better way or more is needed, our door is always open to that input.
I just feel as though it would be great. We just had a good presentation from Sam Credio, our Department of Transportation and Mobility, at mayor and council meeting. Because of course we're looking at numbers, we're looking at estimates, and we as a mayor and council, based on the Move Tucson engagement program that we received from thousands of Tucsonans, are putting together our list of priorities. And I know that we either did or are about to present to the TMC, but it would be a great presentation for the entire CAC to be able to witness, and I would encourage other jurisdictions to do the same thing. So I just wonder if that is a possibility of coming to present based on what mayor and council have given direction on.
Certainly, and we discussed it at our last meeting as well, that the committee definitely wants to hear that feedback and that proposed method of prioritizing projects and transportation plan from the city. And we have had several Move Tucson presentations over the past several years. And so the committee regularly refers to Move Tucson in order to check in to see if the direction we're going makes sense with that and with other plans within the community, including, of course, the RTA's own long-range transit plan and long-range transportation plan, both.
So what would be the appropriate, how would we go about as a city of Tucson to request an item be scheduled for the CAC agenda to present?
I think you just did.
Okay, all right. I'm just asking because
Sure.
it would be great for.
Is there a time that
No,
makes more
I
more sense
actually
to
haven't
do
even
it?
asked Sam this question. I just came up with I just thought about it right now that you were presenting, that it would be nice to be able to have the same conversation that mayor and council had to the CAC.
Other questions? Thank you.
That for Tom, Mr. Chair, I do have a couple of questions on the RTA next item. So, but I thank you, Tom. I don't have any questions.
I
don't go
wonder if
far away.
Mr. Rosemar or Mr. Debonis want to comment on this as well. I think they're trying to get out the door. And okay, that was item A. Are there any other questions or Mayor Romero?
Yes, I just wanted to ask questions to staff in terms of the current RTA programming. And it relates to the RTA Next. Based on current cost estimate to complete projects, are there any concerns about delivering the first RTA, the RTA 2006, aside from the 4 projects that we have identified to move to the RTA Next? Because there are still projects that, especially City of Tucson is working on. So are there any concerns in terms of cost estimates or work that is happening now that you might not be able to deliver additional projects besides the 4 that we chose to move forward if there was a need?
Mr. Chair, Mayor Romero, the 4 projects that were acted on by the board to move to RTA Next, the estimate, the updated estimate is about $8 million more than what we had estimated. I think it's manageable. We can still continue to have the RTA Next dialogue with those 4 projects. The remaining projects ongoing, cost estimates are coming in. And as you recall, the direction from the board was to utilize other regional funds to complete those projects. So I do not anticipate any concerns. I think utilizing additional regional funds will budget those projects beyond 2026, which was the direction from the board initially.
There's some concerns that the Grant Road phases 5 and 6 first RTA project. RTA is not releasing right-of-way money, saying that the project may be deferred. Is there certain issues, concerns that we're?
No, and I think we're getting a little bit off the agenda, RTA Next versus current RTA, but no, the RTA planning process over the next 5 years. That is ongoing. We're having those conversations with the committees. We'll be able to meet funding for those projects.
Any other comments? What's next? We have a motion to adjourn.
So moved. All of it.
Everybody made the motion. All in favor?
Aye.
We are adjourned.
That was less than 30 minutes.
I know.
Can we mentor